The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
As the late Ken Beatrice used to say, from the floor of this building on this frequency, hundreds and hundreds of times over the years, more games are lost than won. And that was certainly the case last night at Northwest Stadium, where the Commanders turned the ball over 3 times and lost to the Chicago Bears 25-24. If I sound a little bit tired, I am. I was there last night and stayed until the bitter end. But I'm here to tell you that I stayed mostly dry. At least there's that consolation. The weather cooperated. It rained before the game. It rained very late in the game a little bit, but the heavy rain cleared out before the game began. And, Commanders have had problems starting games, mostly on the road, but at home this time, they got off to a bad start. This is a team that had not turned the ball over. Now, they hadn't created turnovers, but they had turned it over just 3 times this year, which tied them for the 5th lowest in the league. They turned it over twice in the first quarter, including on the first drive of the game. And it was Jayden Daniels taking the team down the field after they had given up a field goal. The defense had bent, but it didn't fully break, giving up a field goal. And then they're moving the ball down the field. And, it looks like they're setting up for a chance for either Daniels to take it in himself, or Bill is going to carry the ball, or as he later did, hit Zach Ertz. And Zach Ertz the week before had not had a catch for the first time in 11 years. He had 6 of them last night, including a TD, but wasn't enough. They get to the Chicago 21-yard line, and on 2nd and 5, Deebo Samuel went wide in the end zone. He was open, and Daniels tried to hit him, but he threw the ball late. And Chicago safety Jaquan Brisker easily picked it off, and that killed the drive. And Commanders fell behind. They played catch-up. They took the lead. They went on a 24-3 run. I mean, it looked like they were taking control of this game. And then the crucial fumble at the end there, Nashawn Wright pouncing on a football on a bad exchange from Daniels and Bill, and that was able to set up the winning field goal. But again, the big number is 3. 3 turnovers, no takeaways. Dan Quinn's opening statement of his news conference.
Don't like it as the start. We've continued that slow start, and we've become way too accustomed of digging ourselves out of holes. 2 early turnovers, 1 late. All 3 phases dug the hole, and all 3 phases helped get out. But we didn't create enough takeaways to finish -3. You really don't deserve to win many games when you're, in that space. So had chances for interceptions, had chances to get some, did not create any. Honestly, just didn't perform well enough. Run game, both sides. So a lot that needs our attention, and get right back to it as we, get going right against the division opponent next week. But this one stings. When you have a chance even to dig yourself out and go battle for it and not get that job done. But like I said, you got to create them also to finish in the plus.
Yeah, you got to create turnovers. They didn't. But even so, they're down 2-0 in the turnover battle, and they're in position to either put this game out of reach with a touchdown with about 3 minutes to go, or make it very difficult for Chicago by kicking a field goal to go up by 5. And it was a very routine play. There was nothing that was razzle-dazzle about this. This is as basic as you get in the NFL. It's a handoff from Jayden Daniels to Bill Croskey-Merritt, and it looks like, it's not going to be a problem. And you're going to hear here Quinn assess the blame to Daniels, and Daniels take the blame himself. I don't know. When you dissect it, is it possible that Bill didn't wrap up the way he should, a little bit too anxious to get to the line with the ball? I don't know. But it was a poor exchange, and, wound up costing him the game. Not completely, as Quinn said. It's not one play that cost him a game, but that was a killer, and here's Quinn on more with that.
Honestly, it wasn't just that play. There's plenty in there to go, and we just didn't regard it like we can, and so that's the lesson, and it stings, and we've got to grow from them, man. Like, we just, have to make sure we're taking our spaces to go. Definitely a play he'd want back. Man, he's like, incredible player who makes plays, and so it sucks, but like in his space, like, he's gonna make way more than he isn't. But tonight, that one stings.
Yeah, that does sting, and this is an example of leadership here. This is exactly what you do as the starting quarterback. You say, it's on me. And sure, he's put enough goodwill in the bank that he can afford, I guess, to say something like this. But Daniels, who really doesn't talk much after wins, was probably as expansive as he's been all season with taking the blame on what happened on that crucial killing turnover there.
I just lost the ball. Completely my fault. Didn't give Bill a chance, so it was my fault.
What is your feeling now after losing a game that way with the turnovers? Obviously, you guys know you can't do that.
You win and lose. Obviously, as a competitor, you hate losing. But we got a short week, so you dwell on this forever, however long, and we on to Dallas.
Jayden, on the interception, what happened there?
Being aggressive, just go through my keys. But like I said, I didn't play how I hold myself to and how I should play, so I'll be better.
In your past, on the few occasions where you have had performances that aren't up to your standard, what's the week like for you going forward in terms of looking at those things and addressing?
It's just trusting myself, and I wouldn't even say trust myself. It's just trusting the plays and the keys, going through my keys, and being smart with the football. And there's time and a place for everything to be aggressive. And early on, we're driving, got momentum, we got points on the board. Don't make a throw like that, even though I know I can make a throw like that. So you just look back at it and you learn from it. That's kind of what this game is. If you win or you lose, you always learning from stuff, and you can always be better. You're not a perfect player because there's no perfect player on this field or in this league.
On the exchange, was it the ball slick? Did that impact that play at all?
I'm not going to sit up here and blame it on the elements. At the end of the day, I got to focus. I get paid to go out there and focus, playing to play out, and I had a lack of focus right there, and it cost us the game.
Yeah, given an opportunity to maybe make an excuse by John Keim, he didn't take it. Maybe that was a factor, though I didn't feel it being in the stadium. There was a little bit of mist at that point, but the heavy rain had been out of there for hours. It pretty much ended just before kickoff. So I don't know if a slick, wet football really played a factor there. In the booth, Troy Aikman and Joe Buck maybe had a different view of it as they talked about it with Scott Van Pelt. Buck first.
I think it had a lot to do with it. I'm standing next to a guy who every time there may be bad weather, he says to whatever coach and whatever quarterback, how is he or how are you throwing a wet ball? Because he didn't like throwing a wet ball. It has to factor in that Jayden Daniels couldn't secure the snap and then basically is shoveling it to Croskey-Merritt. I think that played a role. But then you have to go back to Chicago and see if they can take advantage of it. DeAndre Swift with 175 yards from scrimmage and some big runs really from the beginning of the ball game. That and the turnovers is, I guess, in the end, the difference in tonight's game.
Yeah, that and the new kicker who has one blocked, and then the life of a kicker. Really an amazing sort of life and existence for these guys. And he's the hero in the end. And Troy, you made a bit of a joke about maybe it comes down to a Hail Mary. It doesn't, but it comes down to a kick. And it is a measure of revenge. If you're Chicago, you lost on this field a year ago, and it sent their season spiraling. For a young team with a new head coach to now have won 3 straight football games, how significant is a win like this against a team that did it to them a year ago?
As far as the revenge goes or whatever happened last year, I don't know that really played into this particular game all that much. I do know it weighed on Tyreek Stevenson's mind because of what happened last year. But for Ben Johnson, the staff, and all of that, they just wanted to come out and try to win another game coming off a bye week, which Chicago has struggled with that over the years as well. But when you're a new coach and a new staff coming in, and you're trying to implement your way of doing things and build something, these games are really, really important. So for them, and the way in which you do it, and they did a lot of really good things they hadn't really shown through the first 4 games, and starting with the offensive line and creating some running lanes, and DeAndre Swift, 100 yards rushing for him, had a big night, looked really good, a lot of good things to build on, but it wouldn't have felt nearly as good if they don't make that kick. Jake Moody doesn't, and they don't head home tonight with a win. So this is great for Chicago. They've won 3 in a row, and they're feeling really good about themselves.
Where do they look better to you from the first time you guys saw them that week 1, I should say, in Chicago, where they have a big lead, then they let it all get away from them?
Well, one is they, like I said, running the ball. I mean, that is what Ben Johnson is about, and everything else kind of operates off of that. I think Caleb Williams still needs to get a little bit more accurate, but think of the opportunities. You know, we would be saying some different things if Olamide Zaccheaus, if he's able to make that catch. So there are some things that if they just execute, they're not asking much, just execute the plays that are there. This offense would have even looked better than what it did tonight.
Yeah, there were plenty would have did tonight. Come on, Troy, you graduated college. That's a point, though, about the opportunities that were there for Chicago that they could have capitalized on even more than the 3 turnovers that Washington gave them. Penalties were a big problem for Chicago last night. They had 9 of them for 84. One of them cost them a touchdown. Washington, which has had problems with penalties, not as bad last night, 5 for 40. The game was, I think, really kept close, even with the turnover issue, because of penalties that Chicago kept committing, giving Washington breaks and shooting themselves in the foot. Third downs, Washington did a much better job this week, 3 for 10. Still having problems themselves on third down. Remember, they were 1 for 10 a couple of weeks ago against Atlanta, and it wasn't as a factor last week against the Chargers, but they were 2 for 8. They were only 3 for 8 last night. So that's something that they still have to improve on. And then the rush game. Not being able to stop DeAndre Swift, who it's kind of like Bijan Robinson, though not quite as damaging, but he was a major factor both running the ball and catching the ball for Chicago last night. He had 14 carries for 108 yards. That's 7.7 yards a carry, and he had 2 catches for 67 yards and a touchdown. So that's 2 out of 3 games where they've had trouble controlling a super back, and Chicago runs 27 times for 145 yards, 5.4 yards a carry. Washington, 4 yards a carry, 31 of 24. So they didn't run the ball as well as they have. And the big reason for that is you're missing Terry McLaurin. You're missing the threat, which would set up the running game. The hope is that McLaurin gets back for the Cowboy game next week. Also, they're hoping Noah Brown can play. You know, that's unfortunately that has marked his tenure here. He has been hurt a lot, and they would love to have him back next week. Plus, Sam Cosmi could finally be ready to go. There was some chance he was going to play this week, but they said he was on the inactive list before the start of the game. And, you know, I was saying this a lot. A lot of people were saying this during the week, that you got to give Bill the ball more. Bill Croskey-Merritt last week averaged 7.9 yards a carry against the Chargers. They gave him the ball only 11 times. Well, this time, 17 carries for 61 yards. That's 3.6 yards a carry. That's less than half per carry that he was able to get against the Chargers. And on top of that, he had a fumble, and whatever role he played in the exchange between he and Jayden Daniels, the result was a fumble. So, you know, and I understand when the team says, yeah, we like the way he carries the ball, we're just a little hesitant to put him out there for other reasons. And I was kind of surprised at this, because at the point of the game, they were forcing Chicago to call timeouts, 3 minutes plus. They have the ball. They're driving in position to kick the game-winning field goal, even though Matt Gay had doinked one off the upright in the first half. I still think he's a little bit in a struggle, but, you know, overall he was okay last night, and his kickoffs were good. That you're setting that up, and I thought they would have kept Jeremy McNichol in the game because of his veteran presence and not give the ball to Bill. And maybe they wanted to boost his confidence or whatever it was. And, maybe the same thing happens with McNichol on the exchange. Maybe the ball is dropped there too. But I just thought they might go with more of a veteran in that situation and giving the ball to Bill. Well, those things happen when you hand the ball to a rookie. Now, hopefully he gets through that, because nothing gets you out of the NFL faster as a running back than fumbling the football. And that's 2 weeks in a row now that he has had one fumble and maybe partly responsible for the other. So that's concerns as they go into the Dallas game. They're actually 2.5-point favorites on the road. Dallas did not look good last week. This past Sunday, losing at Carolina, so that's probably got something to do with it. But bigger storyline is what happens moving forward. Is this the new Manning and Brady of the NFL? I think it's quite possible. Assuming the Bears get their organization together. I don't think that the front office is as good as what they have here with Adam Peters. But Caleb and Jayden facing off for the next 10 years in a way that Manning and Brady did during those years when Manning was in Indianapolis and Brady was in New England. That we could be seeing that. Their stats somewhat similar last night. Caleb did perform in the fourth quarter. That's the key. And Jayden, in this case, just a crucial turnover to go along with the first half interception, which was not good at all. I mean, things will even out, and here we are. Here we have had 2 years. Both games coming down to the final play. One, a miraculous play by Jayden last year, and this year the game-winning field goal set up by a mistake by Jayden Daniels. We'll hear from Caleb Williams as he talked to Lisa Salters after the game. No, that was Laura Rutledge. Excuse me. Laura Rutledge talked to Caleb Williams. So we'll play that conversation. And also a wacky thing in baseball last night. You may not have had your eyes glued to the game between the Brewers and the Dodgers, but something happened last night that had never happened in postseason play before and had not happened in the major leagues at all in over 21 years. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
They both won Super Bowls with other teams late in their careers, but the heyday of the Colts and the Patriots with Peyton Manning and Tom Brady went on for over a decade. And yes, Brady won more Super Bowls, but there were some epic battles between the two of them, including in an AFC championship game where Manning had a terrible start, threw some picks, and came back and beat the Patriots and went on to win the Super Bowl. And it was the quarterback matchup for over a decade in the NFL. Two Hall of Famers going head-to-head. We don't know if either of these guys will get to the Hall of Fame. Got a long way to go, but they went 1 and 2 in the draft, with Caleb Williams going number 1 to the Bears and Jayden Daniels going number 2 to Washington. And the leg up at the beginning certainly goes to Jayden. He was the Rookie of the Year. He got his team to the NFC Championship game, and in the head-to-head meeting with Caleb Williams, who's a local, went to Gonzaga High School, a homecoming. His homecoming spoiled last year when Jayden Daniels threw the 55-yard Hail Mary to beat the Bears on the last play of the game. But this time, it was the last play of the game, but it was Caleb Williams walking off the field as a game winner and having a chance to talk to Laura Rutledge before he headed to the locker room.
Caleb, you just were able to embrace Jake Moody. What can you say about what you thought when that kick was good?
Yeah, I really didn't know who he was when he first joined the team. And then I saw him kick a 65-yarder in practice. And, for what he was able to do coming here, I know he's had some tough times recently, but been able to come in here, rainy, windy, all of this, and come through for us. Proud of him, happy for him, and happy for us as a team.
And you were able to set up that opportunity for him thanks to your defense, giving the ball back to you again. What can you say about their performance tonight?
Yeah, they played a hell of a game. That's a great offense over there. Obviously, I know the offensive coordinator, head coach, and obviously the quarterback, and they got explosive players and things like that. So for them to be able to hold up and do their part, it was only right for us to be able to have that moment to do ours.
I know there were some mistakes tonight, right? But what can you say about the way that you guys were able to fight back and get this big win? Now 3 straight wins.
That's who we are. We fight. That's what Coach said. We went 0-2 the first 2 games. We tied it back up, went 2-2, and now we're 3-2 because of our fight, because of our, how we face adversity and how we come through and come together.
So, could the Bears be this year's Commanders? New coach. I know it's an old quarterback, but not a very old quarterback in his second year, Caleb Williams, who's been looking for this Ben Johnson type of offensive coordinator in the way that Cliff Kingsbury has helped to develop Jayden Daniels. And they get off to a slow start, but now they're cooking. Of course, a lot of it was handed to them, true. But if there aren't some questionable calls among those 9 penalties, maybe the Bears win this game a little more easily. But if this is what we're going to see in the years to come, that there are matchups, and I don't know why the schedule has worked this way. I don't know all the intricacies of it. But this is the 3rd straight year they played the Bears, and all 3 of them here. Weird. And it's the 4th time they played them in the last 6 years. I can't imagine they'll match up again next year, but who knows? And it's something that you want to see. And I would imagine whenever they meet, it's going to be a primetime game. And if you're tired today, like I am, and we've already now had 2 night games, get used to it because they play Dallas next week on the road. Then they have a Monday night game at Kansas City. That'll be followed by a Sunday night game here against Seattle, and that's when they roll out the throwback uniforms. So day after games, especially for people like me, are going to be a little bit sleepy. But the numbers, for both of them, despite the interception that Jayden threw in the first quarter, which was a bad pick, he did throw for 211 yards, 3 touchdowns, and then Caleb Williams, 252 yards, a touchdown. He also ran for a TD. That was important there. He's got wheels, maybe not like Jayden, but he's got wheels, each of them taking 3 sacks. So that's what you want, right? And it's a quarterback league. And if you got 2 of the best quarterbacks going 1-2 and now facing each other on a yearly basis or a regular basis, depending on what shakes out in the playoffs, at the time when both of them make it, and they're both trending in the direction of that happening down the road. Good. So my friend Tim Kirkchin loves baseball, absolutely loves baseball, and he'll often say, they play all these games, but in any given baseball game, you may see something that you have never seen before. And most of us have never seen this happen before. I was not watching this live. I was at the game last night for the Commanders, but I did see the replay this morning, and there was the most unusual double play pulled off by the Milwaukee Brewers against the Dodgers in Game 1 of the National League Championship Series last night.
And Muncy skies one to center field, hit well. This one's got a chance. Freeland going back to the wall. He leaps. It's in and out of his glove, but he caught it. And now chaos on the bases. Might have a play at the plate. The throw. Not in time. No, he's out. He's out. It's a forced play at the plate.
After review, the call on the field, the force out at home plate is confirmed. The runner is out. It's confirmed on the runner at third baseman. The force out is out.
Wow. Yeah, wow. If you're not following exactly what Joe Davis called there, that was, if you're scoring at home, an 8-6-2 double play. What? 8-6-2? Isn't the center fielder an 8? Yeah. 8-6-2 double play. And here's what happened. Bases loaded, 1 out in the 4th inning. Game is still scoreless. Max Muncy hits a deep fly ball to center. Brewers outfielder Sal Frelick tracking the ball, and as he leaped to catch it, the ball bounced off his glove, hit the wall, went back into his glove. Muncy was not out, of course, because the ball hit the wall, but the Dodgers runners, again, you got bases loaded there, the runners thought that the ball was caught because they tagged up instead of taking off for the next base. And Frelick says, he says, I see Teoscar Hernandez going back to tag up at third. He didn't need to do that, obviously. Hernandez did take off for home, but not before a perfect strike was fired to catcher William Contreras, who forced Hernandez out at the plate, which Dave Roberts, the manager of the Dodgers, explained as a brain fart. After getting the out at home, Contreras, the catcher, ran down and touched third base, getting the force out on Will Smith, who had returned to second when he thought Frelick made a clean catch. The play was, and this is the other crazy thing, the play was recorded in the box score as Muncy grounding into a double play because there were forced plays at two different bases. It wasn't grounding into a double play. It bounced off the glove of the center fielder, off the wall, back into his glove. But because they tagged up and because the proper tagging was done by the Brewers, it goes down as an 8-6-2 double play. The last time, this never happened before in postseason play, ever. Going back to the early World Series in the early 1900s. The most recent 8-6-2 double play in the regular season involved a ball hit by Sammy Sosa to Red center fielder Ken Griffey Jr. in April of 2004, although that one ended with a tag at the plate. The sad thing for the Brewers is they lost the game. They lost the game to the Dodgers 2-1, and that series will continue tonight. Some more baseball. John Smoltz, working for Fox, appears on the Dan Patrick Show time to time, and yesterday answered a variety of questions, including this one seemingly out of left field.
Has anybody ever asked you to autograph a ball that you gave up for a home run, like the hitter? Has any hitter asked you?
Don't believe so. No.
So that's a no-go. That you don't.
I would have done it. Oh, I would have done it for sure.
So Bonds said, "Hey, I hit this one off of you. Would you autograph this?"
Oh, sure. Now, I've seen the flip where Bonds, at the All-Star game, some pitcher came to ask him for an autograph, and he said, heck no, you hit me twice. I ain't signing nothing.
We're working on some Hall of Fame resumes. Dale Murphy, Steve Garvey, Don Mattingly.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Anybody else? Steve Garvey was a 10-time All-Star, John.
Yeah. No, Steve Garvey was, when I think of the Dodgers, I think of Steve Garvey when I grew up watching, the 70s and the early 80s, but they're all worthy. And I'm partial, obviously, to Dale Murphy and what he did and how he did it with such bad baseball teams. That's one thing that people don't take into consideration. Then, of course, you got Andrew Jones coming up, who I think is surefire Hall of Fame player, who's yet to get in. But Don Mattingly is one of the guys that everybody who from New York talks about and how good he was. And if he could have stayed healthier, the numbers he would have put up, he would have thrived in today's era. And that argument goes, I'll argue anybody that the Tony Gwynns, the guys who did not hit for power could have thrived today because they don't swing, from their derriere, and they would get on base a lot more.
But they would be swinging differently, John, because they would be brought up differently. Tony Gwynn would be brought up, you got to swing hard. Wade Boggs, Rod Carew. Unfortunately, they would be told, hey, this is what the analytics say.
True, unless they have the special gift like an Arise. We're seeing a shift. It's slow, but the Toronto Blue Jays and the Milwaukee Brewers are not flukes on why they're here. They put the ball in play. They don't strike out. If you look at the last 25 World Series champions, you're not going to find 3 of them that are in the top 10 in my memory that were leading the league in strikeouts or in top 10 in strikeouts. It's hard to do. I know home runs are king, and I get it. But when you can combine the both, which Toronto does and Milwaukee does, it changes how team plays against you. It changes the narrative of you're going to have to work harder to get Toronto Blue Jays from eliminating them from the series.
Yeah, I've been saying that. Put the ball in play, get a walk, take an extra base, steal like all of these different things. And Milwaukee has done that. They don't have star power, but it feels like they're going to always be testing you. And they're not waiting for a big inning. It's just it's death by water torture. It's going to be drip, 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 drip.
No doubt. And we've already seen a game. Unfortunately, the young, pitcher for Philadelphia. When you put the ball in play, you never know what's going to happen. But when you swing and miss, you know what's going to happen. And it's nothing. And again, 162, they don't care how many strikeouts there are. But in a postseason game, man on third. I've seen it. We've seen the 15-inning game. Just make contact, game over. Couldn't do it. And I think for Milwaukee, that's what makes them special. And they run, they field, they have great arms, and they basically have drafted players that fit the narrative of how they're going to play. And that's why there is not one expert, not one baseball expert said Milwaukee would have the best record in baseball leaving spring training. Not one.
That's John Smoltz, Fox analyst with Dan Patrick, though. They did have the best record. They're down 0-1 in the playoff series, the NLCS to the Dodgers, losing 2-1 last night, despite pulling off an unbelievable 8-6-2 double play, which we just talked about. So game 2 of that series coming up tonight. And then you have the Milwaukee, not the Milwaukee Brewers, but you have the Seattle Mariners up 2-0 in their series on Toronto. So I think that baseball would be kind of sweating a Milwaukee-Seattle World Series, coming off Dodgers-Yankees. I think they'd like to have the Dodgers in it, and they have the leg up now, up 2-1. There's a book that is reviewed today by Tom Lavero in the Washington Times, which I am anxious to read. The book is called Every Day is Sunday, How Jerry Jones, Robert Kraft, and Roger Goodell Turned the NFL into a Cultural and Economic Juggernaut. It's written by New York Times reporter Ken Belson. And it's about the economic boom of the NFL, which is now a $23 billion a year business, which is only going to get bigger. And it could even, I don't know if the total revenue will double, but the television revenue, which is insane, could possibly double once they reopen the contract in 2029. It goes until 2031, but there's an option by the league to open it up again in 2029. They certainly will do that. As you can see, what they're doing with television, spinning off all this stuff onto streaming, like, the 2 games last year on Netflix on Christmas Day. I think Hulu's got a game this year. I mean, it's just amazing how much money they are printing. And not surprisingly, they give a lot of credit to Jerry Jones here. He says, when Jones is committed to a path or a road or direction that he feels is the correct one, says Arthur Blank, owner of the Atlanta Falcons, Jerry is a dog with a bone. He will not let it loose until it either eats it, till he eats it, or kills him. People respect that with him. And then he talks about Robert Kraft. Belson describes Kraft as a social chameleon and political operator whose influence on league business was so strong that he was known as the shadow commissioner. And he played a big role in Roger Goodell becoming commissioner in 2006. And Goodell knows where his bread is buttered, as is reported here in the book by Belson. To keep abreast of what the owners were thinking, Goodell called each one at least once a month, keeping track of the calls on a card that he kept on his desk. When an owner wanted help, say getting Broadway theater tickets, Goodell would take care of the request himself. In this way, he made himself indispensable. I imagine he got help from his office assistant. But I don't know. Does he call the Schubert Theater and say, hey, this is Roger. Can you send over 2 tickets because Bob Kraft and his wife are in town? I don't know. That's crazy. But here's the juicy part that you probably want to hear about Dan Snyder. Where is Dan Snyder in this book? Yes, Dan Snyder appears throughout the book, says Tom. And you have heard some of these stories, but you may not have heard all the details about the story. And this is one that Belson writes about. Ken Belson has written this book. On paper, Snyder should have been the kind of owner the NFL needed. He was a young, successful businessman who loved his hometown team and was willing to spend oodles of money on the franchise. Rarely have the owners been so wrong, he writes. There are stories about his interactions with owners and league officials. Raiders president Amy Trask remembers being told by one of Snyder's assistants to avoid making eye contact with him. She took it as an invitation to look Snyder in the eye every time she got a chance. Now, this is the best paragraph of this. Despite being in his 30s, Snyder insisted on being called Mr. Snyder. You've heard that before, though I've told you that I've had maybe 10 to 12 interactions with Dan Snyder dating back to when he became the owner in 1999. I have never called him Mr. Snyder, and I have never been corrected by calling him Dan. And in fact, when my father and I, who was then in his 80s, were at Abe Poland's funeral in 2009, and I introduced my dad to Dan Snyder and his wife, Tanya, my father began calling him Mr. Snyder, and Dan Snyder said, no, call me Dan. So that was my personal experience, but I have no doubt that he told others to call him Mr. Snyder. So that leads us to this. Despite being in his 30s, Snyder insisted on being called Mr. Snyder. When Steve Bisciotti was accepted as majority owner of the Ravens in 2004, word spread through the meeting about a brief interaction that he had with Snyder, who is 5 years younger. "Hi, Dan," Bisciotti said, and Snyder shot back, "It's Mr. Snyder." Bisciotti, according to this story, said, "F you, Dan," before walking away. And I'm sure it wasn't F you. I'm sure it was the full word. Belson writes that Snyder even managed to anger Pittsburgh Steelers owner Dan Rooney, one of the friendliest owners. In 2003, NFL lawyer Frank Hawkins gave a presentation to the owners on a team debt level that included a chart with a vertical bar for each team's amount. The chart looked like a bell curve with Snyder's team, which had the most debt, represented by the highest bar, which happened to be in the middle of the chart. Rooney was fond of doodling during meetings, Belson writes. Afterwards, he went to Hawkins and gave him a sketch he had drawn. Then he whispered, "Thanks for giving Snyder the middle finger." So, I am anxious to read this book. Again, you can find the title of it in Tom's column today in the Times. But the book is called Every Day is Sunday, How Jerry Jones, Robert Kraft, and Roger Goodell Turned the NFL into a Cultural and Economic Juggernaut by New York Times reporter Ken Belson. Again, $23 billion a year business. And would you be shocked with the valuation of the franchises the way they're going if, before the end of the next decade, it gets to be a $50 billion business? I don't think it's out of the question. I think it's crazy. The Bartman incident, 22 years ago today. We'll get to that in the next hour, and also more reaction to the Commanders' loss last night at Northwest Stadium. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. He reacted the way any fan in the stands would have reacted. There's a fly ball, comes into the stands. He tries to catch it. He doesn't catch it. The ball falls harmlessly to the ground. Is not an out for the Chicago Cubs. Yet, Steve Bartman became a symbol of frustration for the Chicago Cubs, a symbol that wasn't finally extinguished until 13 years later when they won the World Series. We'll talk about the Bartman incident, which was 22 years ago today, and the fallout from that, and maybe the ultimate salve on the wound. We'll get to that and more as we continue, but this is a gloomy day here in Washington, and it was a long period of time when you just kind of expected the Redskins or Washington football team or even their first couple of years as Commanders to lose. It was the Dan Snyder era, and when they won, I was like, oh, well, they won. They may have a quarterback here. Yeah, maybe Kirk Cousins is the answer. No, they screwed up in the contract, so Cousins leaves, and various quarterbacks come in. Yeah, Alex Smith, pretty good. Oh, Alex Smith, devastating leg injury, basically ends his career. It wasn't like the gloom and doom after games because it was just sort of a malaise of that 24-year period of Snyder. And then last year is the awakening, right? Wow, they're winning. They got a quarterback. They got good ownership. They got good coaching. They have a structure, a front office, and hey, they finally got the deal done for the stadium a couple of months ago. Things are bright. So when you lose, it hurts more. It hurts like it did in the 80s when they were really good, and they didn't lose that often. And so last night they lose, and they lose in the worst kind of a way. They give it away. It's a game where, there were some questionable penalties, and Chicago hurt themselves as well, with the 9 penalties. But this was a very winnable game, despite turning the ball over twice in the first half. They'd only turned the ball over 3 times in their first 5 games. They turned it over twice in the first half last night. Still, even with that and doinking a field goal attempt off the upright, they're still only down 3 at the half, and then they go on this nice run, and they take the lead and seemingly are about to put the game away. A little more than 3 minutes to go. They got a 2-point lead. And Chicago's now having to burn timeouts. They're at the Bears' 40-yard line. Looks like they're setting up a Matt Gay field goal with limited time on the clock that puts them up 5. and forces Chicago, when they get the ball back, to go for a touchdown. And there's a routine play. It's as routine as it gets in football. Jayden Daniels is trying to hand off to Bill Croskey-Merritt, and the exchange is fumble. If you remember the movie All the Right Moves with Tom Cruise, where there's this crucial fumble which kills it for Amp Pipe High School, it was pouring down rain in the movie. This was just a mist. Whether the wet ball played a factor in this, Daniels would not, say that as an excuse. He put it on himself, but they fumbled the ball. Nashawn Wright recovered. The Bears went 36 yards on 9 plays, and then Jake Moody kicked a 38-yard field goal to win the game. There's a unwritten rule, especially in pro football. If the team performs badly, it's the quarterback's fault. If there's a screw-up on a particular play and there's a question whose fault it was, it's the quarterback's fault. Dan Quinn making that crystal clear after the loss.
When I go back to watch, and I'll have a better answer for you tomorrow, I think it was Jayden on the keep. So that's what he told me coming off. That's like him to take responsibility, even if it wasn't. So I'll have a better answer, but that's what my viewpoint. But I haven't seen it yet, Dave, but that's my viewpoint of it.
You hear that? Even if it wasn't his fault, he takes responsibility for it. That's what leaders do. That's what Jayden Daniels did last night. Now, that doesn't totally mask the problems with Bill. This is what keeps coaches from playing rookies, is that they make mistakes. And as good as Bill is running between the tackles and as exciting as he has been in his short time in the NFL, he's turned the ball over back-to-back weeks. Whether that one was his fault or not, he did have another fumble in the game, which was his fault, and he fumbled last week as well. Here's Quinn.
Not the confidence. Most of the time, I just want to get, what was the cause? What's the lesson that you learn? Are you fighting for extra? Was it high and tight? And if somebody makes a fantastic play on you, I'll give them credit, But if there's a space where it wasn't, secure enough that you clamp it into the traffic, those are the lessons, Nicky, that we got to get right. He's a hell of a competitor. He takes it hard. So it's not the confidence side, but I want to make sure, if there's a technique error, that we can see it. It didn't feel like there was a huge punch that took place, but I'll dig in for sure and find it.
Yeah, there's a news conference from Quinn later today. We'll have some follow-up after watching the tape. As for Bill, he's like Quinn said, it's important to keep his confidence. And I was impressed by this. Not all players make themselves available after tough losses like that. He did, and said this about his confidence.
I still got a lot of confidence in myself, and just gotta be better at my job, and that'll get fit for sure.
What did DQ tell you guys after this
one? It stinks. And we know it do, and we got a short week to turn around and get ready for the Cowboys.
How hard is it to bounce back from a loss like that?
We just gotta get back to work and just get back to work. That's it.
Yeah, they'd like to give him the ball more often, and I even thought in the situation they were in at the end of the game that they would have gone with Jeremy McNichols, veteran. He made some big plays at the end of the game the previous week against the Chargers. They did not. They went to Bill, and I said this after the Chargers game when he only had 11 carries but averaged 7.9 yards a carry. He had 17 last night, 61 yards, half of what he had on per carry the week before, 3.6. Most importantly, definitely fumbled once, and depending on what shows up on film, he may have had a bigger role in that the game-killing turnover, really, at the end of the game. So things to sort out, but those are growing pains with rookies. As for the team, obviously you can't lose the turnover battle 3-0. And what was not a concern going into the Bears game certainly has to be a concern for Daniels moving forward.
You're not going to win many football games in this league if you're losing the turnover margin. So shout out to the Bears and shout out to their defense. They did their job. They got the ball back for the offense to get extra possessions. And you're not going to win games like that.
Jayden, it's been a theme this season where the offense has gotten off to slow starts. What do you think has been, if there has been a consistent theme, why do you think that's been a problem throughout the year?
We just got to execute better. And when the play call comes in, we got to execute, and starts with me, starts with all 11 that's on the field at the time. We got to execute better.
The Bears defense show you anything that you weren't expecting?
No, they just turned the ball over, and you don't win football. They took the ball away, I should say, and you don't win football games like that. So you go out there, and everything that I anticipated on film, they showed, and they just took the ball away more than we did.
How'd you feel the offensive line play today?
I feel like they played well. They gave me time to go out there and make throws, and receivers made plays. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, I had a lack of focus that cost us a game.
Last year, it felt like every time you guys turned or corner needed a play, you found it, you made the play. Does it feel odd that this year it just hasn't quite been like that?
Nah. I mean, it's football. At the end of the day, you're going to win some games, you're going to lose some games. You don't want to always bank on the time where it's a close game. I mean, what some people might say is luck. So you want to go out there and play clean football, play as clean as possible. And we did not do that tonight.
Yeah, 5 games last year, winning on the last possession, including the Hail Mary game against the Bears, and overcoming obstacles like turning the ball over 5 times against the Eagles and winning the game, which was the last loss the Eagles had all of last season, going on to win the Super Bowl after that. So, things have a way of evening themselves out, but that's a big concern, fixing the turnovers. You're going to hear this week from Joe Witt, the defensive coordinator. They got to get more takeaways. They're not turning the ball over enough, but you're not helping them out by continuing to turn the ball over like they have. Jake Moody, this is the NFL, the kicker go round. Washington had 4 different kickers last year. This is the second kicker for the Bears as their starter is out Pinero with an injury. And Jake Moody was actually a draft pick, 3rd-round draft pick by San Francisco last year. And, kickers, they go bad no matter what. And he went bad in San Francisco, picked up by the Bears for this opportunity, and he delivers. He did have one blocked, but, with the pressure on, 38-yard field goal, if he makes it, game over, they win. If they miss, game over, they lose. Moody with Lisa Salters after the kick went through. And it was interesting. If you didn't see this, Lisa Salters is talking to Jake Moody, the kicker, who only has to put his helmet on a few times a game, right, to kick off, kick extra points, and field goals. Otherwise, he's on the sidelines. They often wear a baseball hat. For whatever reason, Jake Moody, while he's doing this interview, game is over. It's been over for a few minutes, too. Still wearing his helmet with his chin strap up.
I mean, it feels amazing. To get, all that support after the game from all my teammates. I got here not too long ago, but for everybody to embrace me and, take me in as one of their own, it's an amazing feeling.
What were you saying to yourself after things kind of went sideways in San Francisco?
Yeah, I mean, it's always good to have a fresh start, and I always believed in myself, believed in my teammates. And, shout out to Scott and Torrey. They made that operation really easy on me. And same with the O-line up front, protecting great on that last one. That you can't draw it up any better.
You missed an earlier one, so what were you saying to yourself as you lined up the game winner?
I mean, I like to say you're only as good as your next kick, so you can't dwell on the past. You got to move on and focus on the next kick.
Well, that kick was good, and the Bears win. That's 3 straight. Breaks a 5-game home win streak for the Commanders as they head out on the road to play the Cowboys next week in Dallas. As for the whole kicking relationship, it's a very strange one in the NFL. And it goes back to when Garo Yepremian, most famous for being with the Miami Dolphins, but started his career with the Detroit Lions, where Alex Karras would make fun of him. He was from Cyprus, Yepremian, been a soccer player there. Probably didn't speak English in Detroit as well as he did later on in Miami. But he used to say, he send him in. He says, I want to kick the ball for a touchdown. So anyway, this is the odd relationship between the rest of the roster and kickers, as described to Scott Van Pelt by Ryan Clark last night.
You see them in special teams meeting. When you're practicing on the field, they're off doing something else. So when I say doing something else, they're playing like hopscotch or jump rope, or they're checking their stocks, right? They live a different life. But that solitary life comes to a head when you have to make a game-winning kick when your team puts you in position to win. And for Jake Moody, a guy that struggled in San Francisco and was cut, this is a huge night.
You have to feel good for the guy. I mean, he came out of Michigan where he had a monster leg and was drafted in the third round because he was coveted for that. And it just was an inconsistent issue with San Francisco, and he was let go. Pinheiro, by the way, has been great for them. So good for him and good for Moody, who gets this opportunity, and he makes it count. But he only gets an opportunity to make up for the miss because there's a fumble. And Joe explained it's misty, it's rainy, and Washington's going to look back at this night and feel like, man, we put a whole lot of footballs on the ground.
Yeah, you absolutely can't do that. And listen, Jayden Daniels isn't the type of player that often turns the football over. You have the interception going into the end zone when Deebo Samuel seems to have some room on the back end. You also have him fumble during the game that he actually recovers himself. You have the Bill Croskey-Merritt fumble. Then obviously the fumble that ends up dooming them late in that football game. It is misty, but that's when you have to pay more attention to detail. That's when you have to be sure that you have a handle on the football. And Jayden Daniels didn't do that. Listen, he's a big-time player, but you cannot have the mistakes that he had in tonight's game.
I can't help but go back to last year's game as a native of Washington and the way we saw the season take off as a result of the victory over Chicago and the way it happened, to wonder, with a much more difficult schedule for Washington, what are the challenges to not allow the way this one slipped away to spiral, given that you have to go to Dallas and then to Kansas City the next 2 weeks? What are the keys for Washington to kind of lock arms and keep moving forward?
I think we kind of had the conversation about the quarterback's demeanor. Right, that the quarterback really just stays here through the highs and lows. I think that's a big piece of it. And then we're also talking about Dan Quinn. This isn't his first time coaching a football team or being the head coach of a football team. This is a man that won an NFC championship in Atlanta. He understands what it takes to persevere through some of these difficult times. They're going to get refocused on next week. Remember we talked about this earlier. You talked about the Buffalo Bills, right? How do you focus on the main thing? How do you take it week by week? Because in a results-based business, you have to not focus on the results, but the journey that gets you to that destination. And that's exactly what they have to do. Look at the turnovers, but also look at what we did well. They're going to have to protect the football, and defensively, you have to tackle better.
Yeah, that has been an issue for them, and they've said that. They said the quiet part out loud, like, we got to tackle better, and they don't. And that allows Swift to get loose for that touchdown, which helps create the possibility for Chicago to ultimately win this game, which they do. Now, there's a line about the man who believes he can and the man who believes he can't are both right. Which man are you? This Chicago team wins a game such as this. I don't want to overstate it, but okay, it's a new coach. Since we saw them that first Monday night where they let a lead get away against Minnesota, and then they lost the following week and got crushed by Detroit, they won 3 in a row. To win like this, what does it do for a team?
I want to answer that question. I'm driving on the golf cart after I leave you on the field in Chicago. I see Caleb Williams. I hop out and I hug him. And I was like, hey, man, are you all right? You doing good? He said, yeah. He said, I'm going to be okay. He said, this year is different. And when he said that, he believed that. He believed that they had what it took in the building from a coaching staff, from a support staff, from a roster standpoint to figure out how to be better moving on from the game against Minnesota. I think that Ben Johnson holding Caleb Williams accountable first, and then also the rest of the team, is something they believed in, something they coveted, something that they wanted. And we've seen them pay more attention to detail each and every week. You have the breakout game against Dallas. You win another close game against Las Vegas. And now against the team that essentially ended the Matt Eberflus era, you find a way to get a win late, and you execute when they don't.
It's just wild to me, Ryan, the difference between winning and the losing. So often it's fractional. They win in Vegas because they block a kick. They win in Washington because they execute a kick. And that's the difference between how you view yourself. And had Washington won, we would have had the most teams ever through 6 weeks to be 2 games over 500. And I don't know that there's a singular great team this year. And Go ahead.
No, I'm saying, isn't that the wild part about this season, though? Like, at this point, we're talking about a team, and somewhere we're asking if the 72 Dolphins are going to be in trouble because this team may not lose.
And it didn't even make it 6 weeks.
Yeah, it didn't even make it 6 weeks.
And so this is a long way for me to meander back to a question on Chicago. In a season where it doesn't appear that there's anyone that's going to run away and hide, might they be the kind of team that could find themselves in playoff discussion by the time you and I are doing this in December around Christmas?
Absolutely, because think of this. Coming into this season, we continued to talk about how difficult the NFC North would be. And there was always a question mark by the Chicago Bears.
Correct.
It was, we know Green Bay is going to be good. We know Detroit's going to be good. We expected Minnesota to be good, and we was like, and now Chicago has Ben Johnson. Where Chicago is telling you and showing us that they're going to get better every week. They're going to improve, and we saw that, and now they're squarely in the hunt for a team that will be fighting for a wild card spot.
They'll probably be favored in 3 of their next 4 games. I thought it was interesting that when he was talking with us on Countdown, and then when he came on with Joe, he said, look, coming out of the bye, you're going to see them. They've added layers. And I think it sounds like if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly, it's Ben Johnson has more trust in Caleb, that we're going to add more and more to this as we go. And you're just going to see a more diverse and versatile offense. And you've won 3 games in a row. And we wondered if they're going to be good. I think they are.
You know what was the telling thing to me? At the end of this game, we all knew that DeAndre Swift was getting the football, and the Washington Commanders couldn't do a thing about it. That's the physicality you want to finish games with, and the physicality we'd come accustomed to seeing the Detroit Lions play with during Ben Johnson's tenure as the offense coordinator.
Yeah, two running backs have had their way with Washington this year. One of them, Bijan Robinson in Atlanta a couple of weeks ago, and DeAndre Swift with a similar performance last night. 14 carries for 108 yards. That's 7.7 yards a carry and a touchdown, and he also had 2 catches for 67 yards. And on that touchdown catch and run, he was hit by Quan Martin near the sideline, and it didn't even faze him. He just blew over Martin and went in for the touchdown. So that's a little bit of a troubling sign for Washington. They keep asking Dan Quinn about tackling. What can he make it better? They're not a good tackling team right now, and they were last year, and that's an issue for them moving forward. Coming up, 22 years ago today, the Bartman game.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Bram is coming up at 11 o'clock. Thoughts on the game last night, which he called. He had also called the Hail Mary last year, both games ending on the last play. This one not as good for the home team. Last night. Also, we're going to have Dan Quinn's news conference today, so I will give you the highlights and my thoughts on it tomorrow when we get together. It was 22 years ago today, October 14th, 2003, Wrigley Field, the Chicago Cubs on the cusp of going to the World Series, where they had not been since 1945, and they had not won a World Series since 1908. So 95 years they were going to finally be in a position to win the World Series, and it was on their racket. It was a closing deal. It looked like it was going to happen. It's the 8th inning, Game 6. They hold a 3-2 lead on the Miami Marlins. They're up 3-0 in the 8th inning. Luis Castillo hits a fly ball.
Again in the air, down the left field line. Alou reaching into the stands and couldn't get it, and he's livid with a fan.
That's awfully close to fan interference right there. The umpire's all over it. The umpire right down there, Mike Everett's on the play. If Alou has to reach into the stands, it's fair game for the fans to catch the ball. If the fan reaches out over the field, then it can be ruled fan interference. That is very, very close.
And that's a Cub fan who tried to make that catch.
Why?
Well, because that's the natural reaction of anybody sitting in the stands. And if you watch the replay, I don't think Moises Alou makes the catch. But what happened next is really the issue, much more so than Bartman, because it was pretty clear that Moises Alou was wearing the weight of the fan base, which had always had frustration. Like 1969, when they looked like they were going to win the East in the National League. First year they had divisions, and the Mets came from behind, caught them, and maybe the best team the Cubs had with Ernie Banks and Ron Santo and Fergie Jenkins and guys like that, they did not make the playoffs, and they had a long walk in the desert. So it wasn't so much that Steve Bartman in the stands wearing earphones as he was listening to the game on the radio, his Cubs hat, his green turtleneck sweater, all those things. It wasn't what he did. I think it was more what Moises Alou did in reaction, as Paul Sullivan of the Chicago Tribune recalled years later.
Moises jumps up in the air, slams down his mitt, makes a big scene. Pryor's pointing. It's just like everyone's blaming this one guy who's got the headphones on. And, we're in the press box. We can see down there. We don't know exactly who they're, reacting to. But then, of course, they showed the replay, fortunately, about 5 zillion times. And then once play resumed, Pryor, might have been his first pitch, was a wild pitch. There's definitely a wild pitch in that sequence. And then he just gave it up. The ground ball to Alex Gonzalez, double play ball, would have, sealed everything. But just booted it. It just totally fell apart from there. 8-run inning. By that point, the whole ballpark is sitting there just in silence and screaming, and they had to escort poor Bartman out of the park. And the story turned basically from Cubs going to the World Series to this one guy blew it for us, even though the pitchers gave up, 8 runs and the shortstop booted the ball, but everything was, pointing towards this one poor guy, and it's going to be forever known as the Bartman game.
Absolutely, and you also have to realize the technology at the time. So there's no video scoreboard at Wrigley Field. The fans can't really see what happened. There are no smartphones. Remember, the iPhone wasn't invented until 2007. This is 2003. But people who are watching at home are texting their friends in the stands to tell them, yeah, there was some guy over there in a Cubs hat and a green turtleneck sweater who interfered with the ball. And he's the villain there. And then you start to have, like, the mob scene at Wrigley Field, and they're chanting a-hole, except that wasn't exactly what they said. They said the full word. And somebody threw a beer on Bartman, and that's when security had to step in and take him away. And it got so bad that Bartman had to have police presence in front of his home. He had to change his number. The governor, Rod Blagojevich, suggested that Bartman join a witness protection program. The governor of Florida, Jeb Bush, offered Bartman asylum. I mean, this was a big, big thing. And to this day, Bartman has not appeared publicly because of this. And he has been vilified, and he's turned down a lot of money to make public appearances and has not done that. And as, time has gone on, I remember being in Wrigley Field with my son in 2008. So that was, 5 years later. And people were saying, enough is enough. Let's forgive this guy. But, to this day, we have not seen Bartman in public, heard from him speaking other than a statement. And John Kloss of the Tribune, a columnist who was part of the angry group of people in Wrigley Field, watching them not just blow it that night as they turned a 3-0 lead into an 8-3 loss, but in the Marlins dugout after the Bartman play. This is before the explosion happened in the rest of the inning. Pitcher Mark Redman, who was the scheduled starter for Game 7, told his teammates, "Let's make this guy famous." And they did. John Kloss among those who did that and said this years later.
So it's not Bartman's fault. The guy had honor. He had honor in the sense that he admitted, right away the next day or two, said, I know what I've done. Right. He admitted that he touched the ball, that he knew the consequences, but he never took money. He never did an interview. He never tried to capitalize on it.
He never tried to cash in on this. He tried to live a quiet life, and a lot of Chicago would never let him live this down, ever.
And he deserves, he's the only man of honor in that whole business. Moises Alou blamed him, right, threw his glove down. Everybody started throwing around. Castillo on the other team was like, thanks for giving us a second chance. Everybody, this poor guy was in the center of the maelstrom. And I was there as a Sox fan. I've been thinking about it.
And you really have been thinking about this. You really regret that.
I'm not joking. I'm sorry, Steve.
Yeah.
I am. I mean, Sox got into the World Series. Everyone was happy. He bore the brunt of it.
Okay.
I'm just sorry. I'm sorry it happened. And you're the only one in the whole thing that had honor.
How about that? The ball found its way into a prominent ball holder's hand, a Chicago lawyer who sold it at auction in December of 2003. It was purchased for $113,000 on behalf of Harry Carey's Restaurant Group. And on February 26, 2004, it was publicly detonated by Special Effects. Today, the remains of the ball are on display at the Chicago Sports Museum, and there are artifacts of it on the restaurant shelf itself. The seat that Bartman sat in, aisle 4, row 8, seat 113, became a tourist attraction at Wrigley Field when the lower grandstands were reconfigured before the 2017 season. That seat was changed. It was changed to section 2, row 8, seat 108 before 2019 more configuration. So it's now section 3, row 12, seat 1, the Bartman seat there. But there is sort of closure on this. In 2016, 13 years later, the Chicago Cubs finally won the World Series, and believe it or not, they celebrated in part by giving Bartman a ring.
The Cubs are hoping this helps turn the page, a World Series ring engraved with Bartman's name. In a statement, Bartman said, "I humbly receive the ring not only as a symbol of one of the most historic achievements in sports, but as an important reminder for how we should treat each other in today's society."
Absolutely. And sometime later, Scott Van Pelt had this suggestion for Bartman on his show.
What would be really cool, but I doubt what happened given Bartman's total seclusion following this incident, would be if he accepted it at Wrigley. He would get a massive ovation because any sane Cub fan understands what happened in 2003 wasn't his fault.
No, and he did not accept the ring publicly, has not to this day. Next year would be the 10th anniversary of their World Series. Maybe he shows up for that, but I would think not. I'm told he doesn't live in Chicago anymore, and I guess has a ring prominently displayed, but certainly isn't going to go out in public. One last thing on this. In 2008, Moises Alou was quoted by the Associated Press as saying, "You know what the funny thing is? I wouldn't have caught it anyway." And he wouldn't have. Alou later disputed the story, said to a writer from the Palm Beach Post, "If I said it, I was probably joking to make Bartman feel better, but I don't remember saying that." And in the 2011 documentary, The 30 for 30, Catching Hell, which is all about the Bartman incident, Alou says, "I'm convinced 100% that I had the ball in my glove." No, you didn't. And the replay clearly shows that, but Bartman has a ring. He went through hell on this. The Cubs finally had their World Series championship, and I guess people can live happily ever after, so to speak. Bram is coming up next, and I will see you here. See you here, he said. I see you here tomorrow at 9 a.m.